Commitment is not simply a declaration of feeling. It's the day-to-day decision to act in accordance with the promise you've made, regardless of whether your emotions are surging or flat. People often confuse the initial excitement of attraction or the warmth of companionship with the substance of commitment. But feelings are transient. They shift with sleep patterns, stress levels, hormones, and the countless variables of life. You can't anchor something as important as love, friendship, or marriage on the unstable ground of how you happen to feel in the moment. Think of it like building a house. The emotional high at the start is the thrill of imagining what the finished home will look like. The joy of selecting colors, picturing furniture, and imagining the life you'll live there. But imagining the house is not the same as constructing it. At some point, someone has to dig a foundation, pour the concrete, frame the walls, and hammer nails. That work isn't glamorous, it's repetitive, it's often uncomfortable. And yet without it, there's no structure to live in when the storms come. In relationships, commitment is that foundational work. It's showing up when you're tired. It's listening when you'd rather talk. It's holding your tongue when you want to lash out, and speaking up when silence would be easier. It's the daily, sometimes invisible labor of making another person's well-being part of your priority list. And this is not because you're in the mood to do it, but because you've decided they are worth it. When you operate from a purely emotional basis, you become a prisoner to your mood. If you don't feel in love one day, you may start to doubt the relationship entirely. But love that is rooted in action recognizes that emotions are cyclical. They rise, they fall, and they rise again. You can outlast the low points if your actions remain consistent. The relationship can even grow stronger precisely because it was sustained through the times when passion dipped. This principle applies equally to friendship. You might not always feel like calling a friend, showing up to help them move, or being present when they're going through something difficult. But commitment means you don't measure your involvement purely by convenience or mood. The depth of a friendship is proven not in laughter at a party, but in the steady loyalty shown when life isn't fun. In marriage, the stakes are even higher. Marriage is a public and personal vow to remain bound to someone else's fate, to weather their mistakes, their moments of weakness, and their seasons of change. That kind of promise is not maintained by spontaneous affection alone. It's maintained by actions that uphold the vow when affection feels distant. You still do the dishes, you still check in, you still protect their dignity in public and address your grievances in private. You still show them through behavior that the bond matters more than temporary comfort. Commitment as action is the great stabilizer. It ensures that relationships are not tossed about by every emotional wave. Feelings are wonderful. They make relationships vibrant, inspiring, and memorable, but they cannot bear the entire weight of the structure. Actions are the beams and pillars. Feelings are the light streaming through the windows. You need both, but without the beams, there's nothing to hold the windows in place. If you choose to measure the health of your relationships by the actions you take, especially the ones that require effort when the feeling isn't there, you'll find that the feelings have a way of returning, stronger and deeper than before. Truth is the oxygen of any meaningful relationship. Without it, you may still have interaction, but you won't have growth. You'll have stagnation, a quiet decay, hidden beneath polite conversation and surface harmony. People often avoid telling the truth in love, friendship, or marriage because they fear conflict. They tell themselves that silence is kindness, that sparing someone's feelings is an act of love. But more often, that silence is self-protection disguised as compassion. It's an avoidance of discomfort, and avoidance is not the same as care. In reality, withholding the truth can be an act of sabotage. It denies the other person the opportunity to see reality as it is and to respond accordingly. Imagine a friend walking toward the edge of a cliff, unaware of the drop ahead. Would you stay quiet so as not to ruin the moment? Of course not. You would shout. You would risk startling them, even upsetting them, because the truth matters more than the temporary discomfort it causes. In relationships, the cliffs are not always literal. They are bad habits, blind spots, unspoken resentments, or destructive patterns that one person can see but the other cannot. If you stay silent to keep the peace, you are not protecting the relationship, you are weakening it. Peace built on illusions will always collapse under pressure. Truth-telling is not cruelty. Cruelty is delivering truth with the intent to harm or humiliate. But truth spoken with the intent to heal, even when it stings, is an act of loyalty. The difference lies in motive and method. If you truly care about someone, you will aim your words not like a weapon, but like a scalpel, sharp enough to cut, but precise enough to heal. Friendship built on truth becomes a place where both people are free to grow. They know they can make mistakes without being abandoned, and they know those mistakes won't be ignored. Instead, they'll be named and addressed. That's how trust deepens, not by pretending flaws don't exist, but by showing that the bond is strong enough to hold the weight of honesty. In love and marriage, the stakes are higher because the level of entanglement is deeper. Your lives overlap in finances, in home, in daily rhythms. That level of closeness magnifies both strengths and weaknesses. If you don't tell the truth about the weaknesses, they will multiply quietly. A partner who feels neglected, unappreciated, or misunderstood will eventually either retreat into themselves or seek connection elsewhere. Those outcomes don't happen overnight. They happen because the early truths were left unsaid. Telling the truth in a relationship also requires receiving it. Many people say they want honesty, but react defensively when they get it. If you shut down or retaliate when someone speaks truth to you, you train them not to try again. That's how mutual honesty dies, one truth at a time. Growth is uncomfortable because it requires shedding old patterns. Truth is the mirror that shows you which patterns must go. Without that mirror, you live in self-deception, convinced that the status quo is good enough. But good enough is the enemy of what could be extraordinary. A healthy relationship is not one where truth is never painful. It's one where truth is spoken often enough that the pain becomes a stepping stone rather than a wall. It's one where you can trust that the person beside you values your potential more than your momentary comfort. That's not always pleasant, but it is love in its most transformative form. The strength of any deep relationship is measured by what happens when life becomes heavy. Joy is easy to share. Laughter demands little from us. But when grief, failure, illness, or hardship arrive, that is when the real test of a bond begins. You discover the depth of love, friendship, or marriage, not in the bright seasons, but in the shadows. Shared burdens are not merely obstacles to survive. They are opportunities to forge a connection that cannot be replicated by comfort alone. When you step in to carry a burden with someone, you're making a statement. Your struggle matters to me as if it were my own. That act transforms a relationship from casual companionship to something sacred. It moves the bond from being about mutual benefit to being about mutual sacrifice. Sacrifice is the highest currency of loyalty. It says, I will inconvenience myself. I will delay my comfort. I will even take on pain for your sake. And paradoxically, such sacrifice doesn't weaken you, it enlarges you. In friendship, shared burdens might mean showing up in the middle of the night when they call in distress. It might mean quietly helping them pay a bill they can't cover or defending them when they're not in the room. It might mean sitting with them in silence when there are no words to make things better. None of these acts are glamorous. Most will go unseen by others, but they will be remembered, sometimes for a lifetime. In love, the principle deepens further. Love is not proven when everything is easy. It's proven when one of you is too weary to carry your own load, and the other silently picks it up without keeping score. Real love understands that the scales will never be perfectly balanced day to day. Sometimes you carry 20% of the load, sometimes 80%. The math changes constantly, but the commitment remains the same. Over time, these imbalances don't create resentment, they create gratitude. Because you both know you've done it for each other before, and you'll do it again. Marriage, with its intertwining of lives, demands this principle most of all. There will be seasons when one partner faces internal battles, depression, self-doubt, grief, and the other must shoulder more of the external responsibilities. There will be seasons of financial strain, health scares, or family crises. If you both approach those seasons with a "that's not my problem" attitude, the foundation will crumble. But if you see the burdens as ours rather than yours or mine, you create a fortress. The act of carrying someone else's burden also changes how you see them. When you see someone at their lowest, when their strength is gone, when they are not impressive or useful in the conventional sense, and you still choose to stand beside them, your respect for them becomes rooted in something deeper than what they can do for you. It becomes rooted in who they are and in the shared history of what you've endured together. It's important to note that this principle is mutual. A relationship where one person always carries and the other always leans will eventually break. But when two people both commit to the idea that your weight is my weight, the bond becomes unshakable. That mutuality turns burdens into a kind of shared inheritance, proof of resilience, trust, and loyalty that grows richer over time. In the end, shared burdens are not the enemy of closeness. They are the very forge that shapes it. When you look back over the life of a relationship, the brightest moments often sit right beside the heaviest, because you faced them together and you came out stronger than you were before. Every relationship, no matter how strong, is vulnerable to quiet erosion. Rarely does a friendship, a romance, or a marriage collapse overnight. The decay happens slowly, invisibly, and often silently, and the most common culprit is unspoken truth. What begins as a small irritation or misunderstanding can, if left unaddressed, grow into resentment. And resentment is corrosive. It eats away at affection, trust, and respect until all that's left is a shell of connection. The antidote to this is not mind reading or subtle hints. It is direct communication. Direct communication is the act of placing reality on the table. It is the refusal to let assumptions guide the relationship. Too often people imagine that those they love should just know what they feel, want, or expect. But that belief is both unfair and dangerous. No one, no matter how close, can see inside your mind. If you don't speak clearly, you leave the other person guessing, and guessing almost always leads to misunderstanding. In friendships, direct communication might look like telling your friend, "I felt hurt when you didn't invite me," rather than withdrawing and hoping they notice your silence. In love, it could mean saying, "I need more time together," instead of letting distance grow until it feels permanent. In marriage, it might be, "I feel overwhelmed with the responsibilities at home and I need help," instead of quietly keeping score and building bitterness. The hesitation to speak directly often comes from fear of starting a fight, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being perceived as needy or demanding. But that fear is short-sighted. The temporary discomfort of an honest conversation is far less damaging than the long-term consequences of silence. In fact, silence is not neutral. It is an active choice that allows problems to deepen roots. Direct communication does not mean emotional blunt force. Tone matters. Timing matters. Intent matters. The goal is not to unload frustration recklessly, but to bring clarity that allows for resolution. You're not speaking to win an argument. You're speaking to repair or strengthen a connection. The difference between confrontation and conversation lies in whether you attack the person or address the problem. One of the greatest strengths of direct communication is that it builds trust over time. When people know that you will speak up instead of letting things fester, they feel safer with you. They don't have to walk on eggshells wondering if they've offended you unknowingly. This openness creates an environment where feedback, even when it's critical, is received as care rather than condemnation. The alternative, letting issues pile up, creates a kind of quiet hostility. You might continue going through the motions of the relationship, but underneath, affection is draining away. Eventually, something small will trigger an outsized reaction because it's not about that one thing, it's about the unspoken 100 that came before it. By then, trust is much harder to rebuild. In the healthiest relationships, communication is constant, not just reactive. You talk when things are good, not just when they're bad. You make it normal to check in, to ask, to clarify, and to share openly. That way, when the difficult conversations do come, they're part of an existing rhythm rather than an abrupt crisis. Direct communication is work. It requires self-awareness, humility, and the courage to risk discomfort. But it is also a safeguard, a way of keeping small cracks from turning into irreversible breaks. Left to itself, silence is a slow poison. But when you speak the truth with clarity and care, you give the relationship a fighting chance to not just survive, but to grow stronger. People often believe that if a relationship is meant to be, it will take care of itself. That idea is romantic, but it's also dangerously wrong. Nothing of value maintains itself without effort. You wouldn't buy a house and assume it will stand strong for decades without repairs. You wouldn't own a car and expect it to run flawlessly without oil changes or tune-ups. Relationships are no different. They require maintenance, not because they're broken, but because they're worth keeping strong. Maintenance is the deliberate act of tending to a relationship before it falls into neglect. It's not a desperate scramble after years of distance. It's the steady investment that prevents the distance from forming in the first place. In friendships, this might mean sending a message just to check in, not only when you need something. In love, it could mean planning small gestures of care, even when there's no occasion. In marriage, it's the willingness to keep learning about your partner, their current struggles, their evolving dreams, rather than assuming you already know everything. One of the most harmful myths in relationships is that once the foundation is built, you can relax and stop building. But life changes, people change, circumstances shift. If you don't continue to reinforce the connection, it weakens under the weight of those changes. Maintenance is not about fixing catastrophic damage. It's about reinforcing the structure so it can withstand the inevitable storms. There's a quiet humility in maintenance. It admits that no matter how strong the relationship is today, it can still deteriorate if neglected. This humility protects you from complacency, the dangerous belief that because things are good now, they will always be good. Complacency is often the beginning of the end. Maintenance in friendships might be as simple as remembering important dates, showing up to celebrate milestones, or noticing when your friend seems off and asking about it. In love and marriage, it often looks like intentionally creating time together, especially when life gets busy. That might mean date nights, shared hobbies, or even just daily moments of connection without screens or distractions. These are not luxuries, they are the upkeep that prevents emotional distance. Importantly, maintenance is not one-sided. A relationship thrives when both people understand that tending to it is part of the agreement. If one person is always investing and the other is always withdrawing, the imbalance will eventually breed resentment. But when both see maintenance as a shared responsibility, it becomes an act of mutual respect. Some people resist this idea because they see maintenance as a sign of weakness, as if needing to work on a relationship means it's flawed. But that's like saying watering a plant means it's unhealthy. A plant needs water not because it's dying, but because it's alive. Relationships are living things. They breathe through your words, your actions, and your time. Stop tending to them and they wither. There is also joy in maintenance when you shift your perspective. It's not a chore to check in, to plan time together, to show appreciation. It's a privilege to sustain something meaningful. You only maintain what you value. Neglect is the language of indifference. Effort is the language of love. In the end, the healthiest relationships are not the ones that never have problems. They're the ones that are continually cared for, even when there's nothing urgent to fix. Maintenance is not the sign of a weak bond, it's the signature of a strong one. It's how you tell someone, without needing to say it out loud, you matter enough to keep building with. Most people wait to act until they feel motivated. They wait to give until they feel inspired. They wait to commit until the emotion is strong enough to carry them forward. This is why so many relationships falter, because feelings are treated as the engine, when in reality, they are the result of consistent investment. If you only show up for love, friendship, or marriage when the emotions are high, you are building on a foundation of shifting sand. The truth is, feelings are not always the starting point. Often, they are the outcome of what you've poured in. Think of a garden. You don't stand in the yard and wait to feel excited about it before planting seeds. You plant, water, and tend, and in time, the growth brings joy. The work comes first. the feeling follows. Relationships work the same way. In friendships, investing before you feel might mean making the effort to reach out even when you're tired or distracted. It might mean showing up to help someone move or support them in a crisis when your first instinct is to stay home. The act of showing up, repeated over time, deepens the bond, and that deeper bond produces the very feelings of closeness you are waiting for. In love, it's easy to get caught in the trap of nostalgia, remembering the excitement of the early days and feeling disappointed when the intensity fades. But the intensity was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to spark the commitment that builds something lasting. If you want passion to remain alive, you can't wait for it to come back on its own. You have to feed it through effort, attention, and intentional acts of care, even when your emotions feel flat. That's the investment that reignites warmth. In marriage, this principle is even more critical. There will be days, weeks, even seasons when you may not feel the rush of affection you once did. Life's pressures, personal struggles, and external stresses can dull emotional connection. But if you only give when the feeling is there, those seasons will become chasms. Investing first, showing kindness, prioritizing time together, speaking words of affirmation, plant seeds that eventually restore the emotional connection. You don't wait for the feeling to serve your partner, you serve them, and the feeling returns. This mindset also protects against the dangerous illusion that falling out of love is an uncontrollable accident. Love is not something that simply happens to you. It's something you build, maintain, and rebuild through choices. When people say, "I just don't feel it anymore," what they often mean is, "I've stopped investing in it." Investing before you feel is an act of discipline. It acknowledges that emotions are unpredictable, but actions are within your control, and actions over time shape how you feel. You don't always start with the desire to give, but if you give consistently, the desire strengthens. This is why couples who weather hard seasons often emerge even more in love than before. They acted in love when they didn't feel it, and the actions reignited the emotion. The beauty of this principle is that it creates stability. It means your relationships are not at the mercy of your mood or circumstances. They are rooted in deliberate choices that keep the connection alive. You are no longer a passive participant hoping the right feeling will arrive. You are an active builder, creating the conditions where love, friendship, and loyalty can thrive. In the end, investing before you feel is a form of leadership in relationships. It says, "I will choose to act now so that something better can grow later." And that choice, repeated over months and years, transforms ordinary connections into lifelong bonds.